12 o'clock, I'm starting.
Yay!
Okay, smart pricing in any market. I think Joanna came up with some of these titles for this, which I thought were pretty good, so we're gonna go with it. So, yeah, everybody's talking about you've got a market shift, and you know, is the market moving up, is the market moving down? What is the market? You know, by the way, you have a handout, that's gonna come for the second part of what I'm going over on how to actually build the data that you need to get everything into your system. So, you know, in the market, and where is the market is the big question that everybody asks. I mean, an appraiser that I have a lot of respect for, some people may not like him, Phil Sterling, at one point he was interviewed by Ryan Paul, and he was discussing the fact that in the Lehigh Valley, there's probably, and I think he said 800 different submarkets. So when you look at what is the market, if you look at Bethlehem Township, I mean, some people would say, well, Bethlehem Township is a market. But then there's a bunch of different things within Bethlehem Township. But the Bethlehem School District is a market, which you can't really compare all the things with the Bethlehem School District because of everything that's included in on that. But if you look at Bethlehem Township, you've got little ranches, you got medium ranches, you got big ranches. You got little 2 stories, big 2 stories, you've got mega mansions. So you can't look at all of those the same. And if you look at the real market reports that I have for Bethlehem Township, you know, you're looking at that the absorption rate goes from like almost nothing to 30 months. I think is the last one that we had. So you know, in the Jim Shaw session, you know, he talked about think hyper local. And that's really what you have to look at. You've got to look at this in terms of hyper local, and what I'm going to show you is how you can analyze the individual market to come up with pricing based upon that individual hyper local market that you want to look at. And I've done 3 historical analysis for you that you can look at. Question: how many people here have been active in the real estate business less than 10 years? Okay. Less than 15. So the point is, if you've been in it less than 10 years, you haven't even experienced some of the things that we're going to talk about and why it's important to look at a trend analysis when it comes to pricing. It's even important to look at the trend analysis now when it comes to pricing. So, you know, and I think, Joanne, you came up with this. Let the data tell the story, which is really, I mean, what you need to do. You got to look at the data and advise and predict better pricing based upon the data. You know, everyone here pays for the MLS, and that's where all the data is. We have more data than anybody else. You can't look at what the press tells you is happening in the market and tell your clients that. And you're always going to have people asking you, how's the market? I mean, July 4th, I'm sitting there thinking, somebody, how's the market? Is it still crazy? You know, because they're reading what's in the press. Okay, so I have a disclaimer for everybody. All right? This course and concept expressed are the opinion, thought process, and ideas of the instructor, creator of the course. The content has not been reviewed, approved, or disapproved by the management, other agents, some of which strongly agree with some of my results, real estate experts, appraisers, NAR, PAR, GLADR, or my college professor, whose name, my college statistics professor, whose name I don't remember, and he taught me the value of accurate interpretation of data. So use everything I'm telling you at your own peril. I will tell you that what I'm going to show you today, I have never taught a class of agents. I have always taught staff that work for me how to do this, because I would have them do the analysis for me when I'd be going out and getting a listing. But I have been using this, and I tried to figure it out because I knew some people would ask, at least 17 years, I think it's more like 20. This is how I've been pricing properties all the time. So to me, it works, and I'm going to show you examples. So a lot of what I'm going to get into, beginning is giving you some validation of how this works and why it works, and showing you actual examples, okay? And feel free to interrupt me, ask questions, challenge anything that I come up with, because that's how you're going to learn. Okay, so as a realtor, what do you do?
Be the expert.
Who thinks that you sell real estate? Look, people have heard this course before. You do not sell real estate. Okay? Nobody in this room sells real estate. No, the whole thing that you do is you sell your most valuable asset in the world. And you know what that is? Pardon me? Your sign. Okay? You know, so what you're all selling is you're selling your time.
Or the time it takes to slide.
Yeah. Well, your time. So I value your time because you're sitting in this room, you've got thousands of dollars being invested in 2 hours to listen to me talk. So hopefully I give you something which is of value and that you can use. You know, and when it comes to how to get this, and one of the things in the course is how to get things from the MLS into your computer. Now, price is an issue in the absence of value. I've said that numerous times to people all the time. You know, that when people look at the price for what your service is, you're not giving them enough information about the value. And Joel Palmieri, I think is how you pronounce his name, Chairman and CEO of the Willis Group Holdings, made that statement in March of 2008 in London at a big insurance meeting. Because Willis Holdings had a bunch of insurance operations. So, you know, I've always wanted to remember that you've got to be able to create value. And when you go out and tell somebody, here's the, you know, your house is worth X, and don't show them why, you have no value. Because at that point, anyone can tell them a number. So, you know, I have one case of a property that I listed where, you know, the agent came out and said, well, gave him a number. And it was, they got there based upon a service that was online about cheap real estate services. And so he gave him a number and told me he'd sell the house for, which was $535, and told me he'd sell the house for 4.5%. And this actually was a past client of mine. So they called me up anyway, and I ended up going out to give them information, and my number on the house, based upon my trend analysis, was 575. And I'm going to share that analysis with you so you see how it is done and how I shared that information with the seller. And then that created value to them. And they were willing to pay me more money to sell their house because I was talking to them about a way that they could get more money and why they could get more money for the property. Numerous times, I'm going to show you examples with that. So what are our goals and objectives today? Whoops, why is it doing that? Okay. See why market trends are important. We're going to review historical data from 2004 to 2011 and compare to current data for a specific style and area. So what I did is I took a house in Bethel Township, I took a house in Hanover Township, and I did the trend analysis from 2004 to 2011, taking all the data from the MLS for those properties, projecting out what the price would have been for that so you can track where the market is going. And that's how you look at the fact of being able to list a property at a price for when it's going to sell and not when you list it. So you think about it, if the market's going up and you price it for where the comps are showing from 5 days ago, you're undervaluing the property. If the market's going down as it did in this time frame, you know, you're going to be overpricing the property and it's not going to sell. And that's exactly what happened. I can show you the data for that as well. Then we're going to do a current market study looking at, we're going to take we're gonna compare current market studies to actual sales data. So I'm gonna show you some market studies and show you what the history is. I'm not gonna do anything on any active listings. And when we do an actual case study, I will not use any property that anybody has listed within the office, within either one of the offices, because that would actually violate your duty of confidentiality for us to be able to do that. How to get the necessary data from your MLS to your computer, and that's what the handout is about. That's going to show you step by step how to build the system that I use to get the data from the MLS into my computer and get it into a spreadsheet. So learn the step-by-step process to create detailed reports and charts using the existing MLS. I use Google Sheets to do that. You can use whatever program you want. I did not do a step-by-step guide for Google Sheets. If enough people wanted to do that, I would put that together as well. I'd do the step-by-step guide for that. So as I said, how to price your listing for the sale date and not the list date. How to get the sellers to list their property at the price necessary to win. And how to get the buyers to understand the pricing necessary to create a winning offer. This is not only done for sellers. This is done for buyers as well. And if we have a chance, we'll talk about calculating the absorption rate. But that's if we have a chance, if we have the time to do that.
That's the
Okay.
honors portion.
Pardon me?
That's the honors portion of the class.
If that's what you want to call it. Does that mean you only get that if everybody passes?
We understand everything before that.
Okay. So I'm gonna go into some terms and discuss some things, and you may already understand it and you may not, but this is actually what I talk to sellers about. When I sit down and talk about a price analysis, these are the things I talk about. A statistical analysis is the process of collecting and analyzing data in order to discern patterns and trends. It's a method for removing bias from evaluating the data by employing numerical analysis. This technique is used for collecting the interpretations of research, developing statistical models, and planning surveys and studies. I mean, I tell people all the time, when I price your house, it's a statistical analysis. Another agent's gonna come in and show you 3 comps, and I'm gonna show you 3 years worth of data. And what you're doing when you do that is you create value. And when I go through that, it's much easier for me to get people to pay me. So I have very few people, when I'm done with everything, that are wanting to negotiate the commission and cut commission with me. And the most important part of that, it's a method for removing bias from evaluating data and employing numerical analysis. The bias that I talk about with that is that everybody is saying, well, my house is special. Okay, and therefore everything that you're looking at doesn't count. So you want to get that out of there. The next term that's going to be important is a statistical outlier. An outlier is an observation that lies an abnormal distance from other values in a random sample from population. In a sense, this definition leaves it up to the analyst, you, or a consensus process to decide what will be considered abnormal. Before abnormal observations can be singled out, it's necessary to characterize what's normal. And when you look at this by looking at a spreadsheet, and you can look at the factors that we use in the analysis, you can see what is totally outside of a range of normal. And that would mean that you need to go in to look at the MLS and determine, is something wrong with the data that was put into the MLS, which is often the case, or is this just one that's unusual and you want to get rid, you want to take it out of your data set?
Would an example of an outlier be a foreclosure? Like low ball foreclosure that was, a fire property or something like that?
That is good, but the difference is with that is that when I'm doing an analysis, if for, like right now, I will not put any foreclosure into my analysis. I get rid of them, because there aren't enough of them to have it be an ordinary case. So if I'm in an area where you don't have foreclosures, you're not gonna consider those.
Okay.
You're not gonna use, if you're looking at where you have a lot of foreclosures, then you might consider it.
So like an outlier would be like mom sells to daughter for half.
Pardon me?
Like an outlier would be mom sells to daughter for half the cost of the market.
Correct.
Fist bump.
Okay.
Right. So this definition leaves it up to the analyst or consensus process to decide what will be considered abnormal, and that is you. And that's where you need to develop a little bit of skill to be able to know what you want to take out of your analysis and what you want to leave in the analysis. And it's very interesting when you go through and see some of these samples that I have for you. So common level ratio. Who's ever heard of common level ratio? Common level ratio is a ratio that measures how a county's base year assessments compare to current real estate market valuations. Common level ratio is established annually by the Pennsylvania State Equalization Board. If you Google common level ratio, you'll see it. And you can see what the common level ratio is for every county in Pennsylvania. So when you look at the fact that somebody sells a property and they sell it for below market, and then they are later, the county is coming back and saying, you know, you need to pay a higher transfer tax on that property, that's because they have looked at the common level ratio based upon what the sale price and the tax assessment is, and realized that for some reason this property was sold undervalued. So that can occur. That's what the purpose of the common level ratio is. In my spreadsheets, I use a price to assess value ratio. I have an appraiser that I do a lot of work with. I've worked with her for years. She's an MAI appraiser. She's actually retired now. But I remember one time we sat down and I was doing a pricing on a property, and I told her I was going over how I do this, and I mean, she really had a problem with the fact that I was using factors like price to assess value and price per square foot instead of using the elaborate method that the appraiser uses. So the price to assess value ratio is my version of common level ratio. It's a relationship between the current price, be that the list price or the sales price, to the assessed value of the property. So you can take all the common level ratio, or all these price to assess value ratios, get an average, multiply it times your assessed value of the subject, and you can come up with a value.
Say that again?
You can take an average of all of your price to assess value ratios in your data set.
When you say price to assess value.
Price to assess value.
That's ratio.
Okay, yeah, you're right, okay.
You can take that average, multiply that times your assessed value, and come up with a projected value of your property.
Huh.
Price per square foot. Everybody's heard about that. Price per square foot, pretty easy. It's right in the MLS. It's not always accurate, and sometimes you've got to go in and check that a bit against county records to see what you have. But generally, you're using livable square footage for this calculation. Price to original price.
Is that like price reduction you're talking about?
Pardon me?
Is that like a price reduction? As a ratio?
Could be, or it could be a price increase. So price to original price is used to show the change in price from the original price to the final sale price or the current list price. This ratio could be important when the client is telling you, but my neighbor sold their house $45,000 over asking price. Was the asking price realistic? I have an example that I can show you where two of those occurred, and I can show you how. I mean, I'm working on a listing right now. I was out to work on the listing, and they said, well, we had another agent come in. I said, oh, that's good. And after I'm going through my price analysis, and I told them what my price was, and they said, well, his price is $75,000 less than yours. I said, oh. He said that what we should do is underprice it to create a bidding war. And I'm going to show you why that is not a good idea. An example of how that doesn't work. The absorption rate. The absorption rate is a really good indicator to see the change in market. So I think somebody said something about the shift. There is somewhat of a shift, but it's nothing that's major. I mean, you're still looking at, yes, your absorption rate is increasing, but the absorption rate is still where you're sitting and looking at that you're in an extreme seller's market. I have about 20 some different markets that I do a real market report. I have a company that does a real market report for me every week, and I can track what all the absorption rates are by individual market. Okay. Market study and trend analysis. You want to use similar property type and size. So if you're using a ranch and you've got a 1,500 square foot ranch, you can't compare it to an 800 square foot ranch. And if you're using a ranch that's 1,800 square feet and you have a two-story that's 1,800 square feet, your price per square foot on those two factors is going to be much different. Ranches are generally going to be selling for a higher price per square foot. So you've got to keep your data in the same set. The data set's got to have similarity to it to get it to work.
So do you run into situations where there are no other range comps?
No.
What do you do in that case?
No.
Okay, so,
I'm doing a 3-year study. I'm going to find some ranches.
okay,
In 3 years, there's going to be other ranches that sold.
and with your algorithm, you're gonna be able to interpolate where it should be today, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Got it.
I mean, when you get into some really unusual properties, this won't work. But what you can do when you get into something unusual is that you can track what the trend is for the area, not necessarily for the style. So, same market area municipality, exceptions may be necessary. I'm going to show you where there's an exception that's necessary, but I had to do an exception for an unusual property which didn't have similar comps. So there weren't similar properties due to lot size. Different market areas may have radically different results. I'm going to show you something in the 2004 to 2011. I took the same type of house in Bethlehem Township and Hanover Township, and you're going to see what the differences are and how those markets responded. That's why when somebody's talking to you about what happens in the market, you know, if they're in Bethlehem Township and you just sold something in Hanover, you can't take that necessarily, tell them that how the market's reacting based upon that. And that's why all the things that you get from national studies are worthless. I mean, you've got to look at the Lehigh Valley. The Lehigh Valley has historically had just strange things that have occurred for our market. One of which was in '78 was completed. You saw a big boom then. You cannot use cross county lines. Okay? Because everything gets blown, like number one, your price to assessed value ratios totally get shot when you go across county lines. Because Northampton County is 50% assessed value, Lehigh County is 100, and you just can't do it. Different assessors, so you stay out of that. And you need ample time to establish your trends. So if you're going to do something that's, you know, go back 1 year, you're not even going to have a whole year. You're not going to see a trend. You're going to see what happened between then and whenever you started. Yes.
I'm sorry. Caution if you use school districts.
Yes.
Explain that a little more to me, so like,
Sure. For example, if you wanted to use the Bethlehem School District and do pricing based upon the Bethlehem School District, you've got all these different areas and you're pulling data from these different areas. You have 2 different counties. West Bethlehem is Lehigh County. The rest of Bethlehem School District is Northampton County. When you go and look at using school district as your common denominator, even when you're looking, if you're in Parkwood, you've got a whole bunch of different municipalities that can be coming into your school district analysis, which would not necessarily be valid.
And each one of those assesses differently, and that plays into your price versus assessed value ratio?
you're just gonna see when you go and change municipalities, when you go in and see what happens in the Bethlehem School District with Bethlehem and Hanover, you're gonna see what I mean about how things react differently. And I can actually go in and show you the spreadsheets when we get into it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's one of the things that's just a given, because, you can't use a comparison between a property in Lower Macungie and a property in Albertus, right? Would you agree? Same school district. So therefore, that's not gonna work. Some school districts, you can look at it and have it work, but many of them, you're better off to not do that if you can avoid it.
And you're saying solely used on school districts, right?
Pardon me?
And what you're saying is solely used, school districts to filter. So if I were to filter Northampton County and Bethlehem School District, it would take out the lead portion of that.
I still wouldn't do it, because you're
Okay.
not gonna be able to look at North Bethlehem and Hanover Township will have different values. Because North Bethlehem and Bethlehem Township, because North Bethlehem is gonna have a higher tax rate.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was saying. There's another factor that municipalities will put into this. That sways it one way or another, you know?
Correct.
So usually a last ditch effort to, if you can't find the data, then you go as broad as you can, but I have been told that appraisers will not go out of the school district. But just as Joe was saying, each school district can be broken up into different housing values.
Rules of thumb are always a problem, and I'm gonna show you an exception to what I did with the concept of municipality. Why there was an exception, how I got it to work. Any other questions? Because I'm gonna be able to answer all the questions. If you have any questions, just ask, because I'd rather deal with it and help you learn what this whole process is about.
I guess what I'm gonna learn more about all these factors that go in and differentiate why that value is different. They're gonna get to that, right? Yep, okay.
We're actually going to pick a property and do a trend analysis on a property.
I heard two different time elements, 3 years and 10 years, so what's the difference there?
I did a 10-year analysis just to show people a history. I'm never gonna do a 10-year analysis for when I'm going out to list a property.
Okay.
I did it 2004 to 2011 because I wanted to show people the historical information that you could look at as to what has occurred in the past. And when people are talking about this is gonna be a crash similar to what we had before, or the bubble, what we had before and what we have now.
Okay. Makes sense.
Okay, so let's look at some historical data. So I'm using price per square foot and price to assess value. Now what's interesting in this is that if you look at Bethlehem Township, in the 2009 to 2011, it was a straight downward trend. There was no change, it just kept sliding. But when you looked at Hanover Township, you had a slide down to 2009, and then you had a bump up to 2010, and then the slide back down. Can anybody tell me what happened in 2010?
Somebody famous
Pardon me?
Somebody famous moved
No.
there.
That wasn't when Obama gave,
Tax credit.
tax credit.
The government created a tax credit, which was an incentive for people to go out and buy a house. I think it was an $8,000 tax credit.
But it worked in
Why did
Hanover.
it affect only Hanover Township and not Bethlehem Township?
I can't tell you that.
Preference. Yeah.
The only thing I can tell you, the only point that is important to make here, and is the big thing, is that when you're looking at what happened in Bethlehem Township, no effect. This is why you can't go out of municipality. Why did it not have an effect? I can't tell you. All I know looking back 11 years is that Bethlehem Township didn't have any benefit. I don't remember why. I don't remember what was going on in the township then. Yes.
It seems like a consistent ratio between the two different price assessments, what actually sold for and the assessed value. So would you be able to like calculate the ratio and then go see what the assessed value was and use that as a way to come up with the sales price?
Say that again?
There's a consistent ratio between the two
Yes.
lines.
Yes.
If you determine what that ratio was,
That's how I determined that. I've actually built a spreadsheet and I've given you all those ratios.
So who's about to teach it?
So you're gonna see that.
That's what he's doing.
I do that to come up with this. That's how I get to this point. So when I show people these charts, I have all the data, and I print out all the data and give them all the data. Okay, next thing, days on the market. So we're looking at this as what happened with days on the market, and you can see that in Hanover Township, you had the same drop on days on the market, but then, from 2010 to 2011, there was a drop. So, I can't tell you why this occurs, I can just tell you that it occurred. I can't go back and look at 10 years ago and remember why. But what you can,
significant to today?
pardon me?
How is that significant to today?
The significance to today is the fact of how you need to look at this and realize that you cannot cross municipalities. That when you're looking and saying, I'm going to do something with an analysis in Bethlehem Township, I've got to stay within Bethlehem Township because Hanover Township may be totally different. That's the thing that we're looking at. That's the validation that I'm looking to achieve. The next thing is price to original price ratios for Bethlehem Township and Hanover Township, and you can see where it's so much different than what you're going to see today. It's so much different in terms of now you're looking at things are going up. So we could tell back in these times when you're looking at this, and if you were to look at this, you were pricing something in 2009, and you're looking at back to 2007, 2008, and you're pricing something in 2009, it can tell you that what's happening is that people were not pricing the properties well because they were continuing to negotiate the price farther and farther down. And that's the point that you need to be able to look at today when you do the analysis is where is that price to assessed value ratio? Now, then I looked at what happened with the 2 stories and the ranches in Bethlehem Township on the same time frame. I mean, the trend lines are totally different. They're very similar, but still they're different. They're not going to be the same. Your numbers are not going to be the same when you go and look at putting this together.
So I'm seeing there that the ratios get cattywampus, right?
Pardon me?
Am I looking at that right? That the ratios are not consistent?
Yes. And you're going to see that very often when you're doing this analysis that your price to assess value ratio, your price per square foot, very seldom are they ever going to come out exactly the same. They're always going to be somewhat different. And that's where the finesse comes on what you do with the evaluation. Okay. So days on market trend for the ranches, you can see where that was. I mean, back then, what's, in the last year, what is the longest market time anyone has had on a listing?
A week, maybe?
A week? Has anybody had a property on the market for a month?
I've had one.
I got nervous when I
Just
I'm just looking at palpitations.
I mean, you look at the days on market in 2010 for Bethlehem Township was, what, 130 days? 130 days was the average time on the market. I was talking to somebody recently who said a lot of agents would not even understand what it is that you need to do when you have a house that's on the market, how you service a seller with a house that's on the market for 120 days. I mean, it's like you're married to somebody for 4 months. It's like, and then they ask why realtors drink. Okay? Now, so when you look at Bethlehem Township and you're looking at the 2-story and ranch, and I didn't do the breakdown, I didn't do an analysis for ranches in Hanover, but you're looking at that, you can see how there's such a big difference in and how much greater the price change was. Okay, now we look at today. So now we're gonna look at what it was like then and what it's like today. Now, Bethlehem Township, 2 stories. You are still seeing a climb. You're still seeing that this market is continuing to go up. However, the price to assessed value ratio is not going up as steep as the price per square foot. Days on market. I mean, the days on market, it's like, our average is less than 10 days on the market. It's like, that's speed dating. And the price to original price, based upon the average of what we looked at here, was over 106%. Now, if you look at my real market reports for Bethlehem Township, it's 103% for the township as a whole. So we're looking at this area here, you have more people negotiating up in price. And that's important to be able to look at when you're looking at your pricing, and that you're gonna see later when we go into this. Now, the indicated value trend on Hanover, again, we're just looking at some history. Days on market, and this is interesting, when you look at this here, what's happening? In Hanover Township, your days on market are starting to climb.
Slowing.
So there's a little bit of the shift that you're talking about, but it's still, your days on market is going
From
from
10
maybe
minutes to 10
7
minutes.
to 11. But it's still something that you need to prepare people for. And then your price to original price, that's kind of flattened out. We're looking at Hanover Township, you're at about 104%. Now, looking at, and here we are, we're looking at Bethlehem Township and Hanover Township comparing. And we're looking at the days on market, we're going backwards for some reason, I think. No. Yeah. Okay. Now I want to show everybody, I've got 2 charts to look at.
Figured that one out.
Pardon me?
You figured that one out.
Yeah, I did. I figured that out. I don't know if I have enough, but No, you just take one of each, one of each. One of each, I'm giving you a second. Now, I'm gonna show you the actual data, but I'm giving you the print. And I gave these to you so that you can, and then I'll bring up the actual studies, but what we're looking at is, that we're looking at 2 properties, and this was done, this is very clean. This is like real time. This is your Bethlehem Township current 2-story pricing. So this one right here,
Oh, thank you.
the agent listed that $385,000.
Oh, that is the second one. You gave it away?
Okay, we all ready? The agent listed it for $385,000. And what you're seeing is that in the price to assessed value ratio, it's sold at 4.66 times assessed value. You're gonna get a better handle on this as I go through this, but it sold at 4.66, but it was listed at 4.17.
Wait a minute, 4.17 of what?
Assessed value.
That is the ratio of the price to assessed value.
Okay,
So what I did here is this is taking the list price divided by the assessed value is 4.17, the sale price was 4.66.
Can I just stop you just for 1 second
Sure.
and
Fine,
talk
sir.
about assessed value for a second? I never paid attention to assessed value on those tax records. Ever. Never knew I should. So this is like a big news flash. I don't know if anybody else is having that experience at the moment. But I'm going, what? That means something?
That's the entire point of what you're looking at, is that this means something and it gives you a different perspective to look at when it comes to how to price a property and what the relationship is between that assessed value. Look at it this way, the assessed value in both counties is at the same time frame. So theoretically, if you're looking at the same type of property, the assessed value should be similar to what it was for another property. In other words, that relationship. Now you have people like me, when Lehigh County reassessed, I went in and took every one of my assessments and had every assessment lowered, so I would screw up my scenario.
Because you pay attention to these things, but a lot of people don't.
Right.
It's-
So refresh my memory, give me a little, refresher course on assessed value, how is it calculated? Why is it grossly different than the price value? Like, I know it's for taxation and stuff like that, but what would you believe that one municipality versus another would do it the same way?
Number one, all the assessed values are always established by the county assessor.
Okay.
So when they go out,
Okay, you're right, yeah.
so when they go out and assess the properties, they're going out as of that base year and doing all the assessments. So even when a new construction build is done, they're looking at pricing that based upon the tax year that the countywide assessment was done. So if you get a new construction, when the county goes out and assesses it, they're not assessing it at current market value, they're assessing it based upon the market value back when the assessment was done for the county.
So it's actually related to market value at some point in time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But see, the difference is when you look at Northampton County, they're at a 50% assessed value. So in other words, it's, the assessment is 50% of what the market value was, whereas Lehigh County is 100%.
Okay, so that, I don't get that.
Repeat that?
So when Lehigh County did their reassessment, they said, we're gonna reassess all the properties and come up with a new appraised value for tax purposes. And the assessed value, pardon me?
Assessed value.
No, the appraised value equals the assessed value. So the appraised value for tax purposes
No.
gives you the assessed value at 100%. Whereas in Northampton County, the appraised value for tax purposes related to an assessed value that was 50% of the appraised value.
Why did they do that?
Why is it different than the other?
Just the way it's just how it's done.
So they.
It's like there isn't, I mean, Lehigh County up until the last reassessment was also done at 50%. But the last time they did the reassessment, they decided we're gonna do it 100%.
Does that allow them to collect higher taxes then because the value is higher?
No.
Okay.
That's the millage.
No, it doesn't, because when they do a countywide reassessment, they're limited as to how much they can increase the tax in each one of the
Well, that's
municipalities.
based on military.
Right, based upon the millage rate.
So then what would be their benefit to going from 50% to 100%?
Simpler math.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more clear.
That's a good answer, I didn't think of that.
It's just simpler math. Why add an
More
extra times
transparent
two
for the
calculation when you
owner.
don't need to?
Okay.
Joe,
Right.
may I stop you one
Sure.
more time? Could you explain your math again? Because I'm trying to, what did you buy, you took? You get your 4.7 and your 4.66. You took
4.66
yeah,
is the sale price,
at
this
4.30.
column, 430 divided by 92.3. 4.17 is 385 divided by 92.3.
Thank you.
Now,
That's
Assessed
just
value.
when this person looks at listing this and lists this property undervalued, okay, the importance of this number down here, that property sold for 430. Based upon the analysis, that property should have sold for between 448 and 450. Based upon how everything else sold. So, you know, when you go and look at the fact, I'm gonna underprice this so that I create a bidding war, that's great, if the bidding war works out. But what happens if you don't get enough people in to bid? That's why looking at your pricing is so important. And if the individual that priced that property would have looked at the history, they would have known that their assessed value, or their price per square foot of $170.58 was off.
I would love to do this.
Pardon me?
So I guess
Pardon me,
what's,
Joanna?
It's okay, go ahead, Scott.
someone's going in my head is how much the trust in terms of assessed value versus why would the trust have more than the market value?
Because the assessed value is gonna be the same all over. That's the theory. The theory is that when the assessments are done, that they're looking at all properties and creating an equal number based upon the fact that under the Constitution of the state, people should be paying an equal tax basis for the real estate.
So and they value each house, so like if I were to do a finished basement without permits or something like that, my assessment may be skewed according to what it's worth?
Yes.
Okay.
But the finished basement isn't gonna add that much value.
Sure, that was just an example, so like, based on what the county office knows the property to be, last full record, certificates or whatever, they assess that value. But when I walk through the property and say, wow, you just gold plated everything in this house, maybe there's a little more value to it, I don't know.
Talk to the appraisers about what's gonna happen with the valuation for below grade finished base. People are gonna get killed on that with appraisal anymore.
Oh, I don't understand that, so again,
If you have below grade finished base, it's hardly gonna
Oh,
count for
sorry.
anything
Okay.
based upon what the appraiser comes out at.
got it.
So the people that have all these, you know, like, I know of a guy that's got like over $100,000 into a finished basement.
Yeah.
I mean, you should have just flushed that $100,000
Sure,
down the toilet.
so let's say they added a second stall garage, right, that's worth something,
Second stall garage, they probably would have gotten a permit for that.
but if they didn't, then the assessed value would reflect that, right?
Do you know what Lehigh County did when they reassessed the county?
Is that-
Pardon me? They flew the entire county and compared all the properties based upon what they flew and what they had on record, and then they went out and reassessed people where the footprints were different.
That's a lot of
Yeah, I
labor.
had somebody call me.
No, it's not, I mean, but you know, they're spending millions of dollars to do an assessment, and that's one of the things that they did.
Okay.
Okay, let's get out of this for a minute.
I have to ask you this, you said flu.
Pardon me?
What does that mean? An airplane?
Pardon me?
You said flu. They flew.
They took a plane and they flew it over the county and photographed the entire county.
I also had an assessor call me during that time and say, I'm looking at a property that you have for sale. Do they really have something added on the back? We don't have any permits for that in our, so.
I sold a property years ago in Palmer Township, and it did not have a finished basement and a full bath on the assessment records. And we made them get a permit. They got the permit, it increased the assessment and increased the taxes.
And increase their value.
Any way to get a buck. That's why those township buildings are so nice. If you think about it,
But increase
they
the
used to be in
value.
trailers. They used to be in trailers years ago. Now they're these big monstrosities.
Talking about the basement.
Yeah,
Did
yeah,
the
that's
records
good.
say that it increased the value, but at the same time?
It's amazing.
I actually created an appraisal problem on that property because when they started that rule about what they were gonna do with basements was just when that house was getting appraised and we got dinged on it. So it did have an effect.
However, somebody may pay more if they leave that in law.
Okay. This is what this spreadsheet looks like when it's a finished product.
And these are all like homes and like municipalities, right?
These are two-story colonials in Bethlehem Township. And this is current. So what you're looking at right now is 2019. But what I want to do is I want to scoot up to 2022. Okay, so 2022, we're looking at that this person listed this house for $170.58 per square foot. And they listed it at 4.17 times assessed value. And I gave you the 2021 sheet that you can look at, but when you look at 2021, and I have, I think that on this, I truncated some of this to get you to be able to. So if they would have done an analysis like I'm talking about when it came to pricing the property, and they would have looked at last year. So before they priced this property, they would have looked at 2021 to see where did this property price out at. So what you're seeing is that the comps came in at 178.38 a square foot in 2021, and 4.49 times assessed value in 2021. So this person, is able to say, oh, I sold this house for $45,000 over this price. But the reality is that they undersold the property by $20,000.
Sold for $430 should have been sold between $448 and $450. And so the square footage ratio and the assessed value ratio give you your range.
Correct.
And you can, and if you use ranches and colonials, it screws up your price per square foot.
Absolutely.
You know, second level is not as valuable as first level.
No, that's not why it is. The reason why the ranch sells for more is it costs more money to build a ranch. A ranch is more expensive to build. A ranch is more expensive to build because an 1,800 square foot ranch and an 1,800 square foot two-story, 1,800 square foot ranch has 1,800 square feet of basement, foundation, 1,800 square feet of roof.
And they're also, I would say, more in demand in our market right now than the two-story.
Correct. Really?
Yeah.
Ranches are all.
Yeah.
But you said in our market. Thinking, you talking about geographical location, or you talking about
In the Lehigh Valley, in the Lehigh Valley, you had this time when builders were building nothing but two stories.
Yeah. Colonials are very popular.
And they still are. Go out and try to find a new build of a ranch on it.
That's not in 55.
That's not in the 55 and older. And the reasons go back to the size it takes up. You need a bigger lot.
Yeah.
And it's more expensive to build.
Right, back in
Correct. Yes.
Split levels, bi-levels, how does that play in?
Split levels and bi-levels are always more difficult to use, and you've got to do a lot more research on split levels and bi-levels every time you do a price analysis for them, because people don't enter the square footage correctly, and you've got to look at each one of your comps, which you can do it, but it takes more time. So I'm not going to do a split level or bi-level of the class today. It's not, you can't do it. So,
Sure, question.
yes.
About this comparison. It is from the 448, 450. If this person had listed it at over what he listed it, not 475, but closer to say 434, would it not show compared to the market right then that people will see that it's highly priced?
No.
Okay, because I don't know if everybody looks at the way you are looking in market analysis that you are doing.
But what you're seeing is, since this house was priced at $385 and sold for $430, with multiple offers in it sold in 6 days with multiple offers, and it sold for that much over, everybody knew. Everybody that was looking at it knew. That's why it sold with multiple offers and went up to the price that it went up to.
They were worried about it appraising, right?
No, I mean, they wouldn't be worried about it appraising, but I try to negotiate appraisal gap coverage in every listing I have anymore. Simply because I don't know what's gonna happen with appraisal. Okay? Any other questions on this?
And if this were your listing, and you had priced it appropriately, and it had under appraised, do you use your market data to substantiate your pricing with the appraiser?
And that's difficult to do because appraisers don't like my analysis. I mean, they don't like it because it just doesn't fit into what their scenario is. It's like, this is not how you're supposed to do it.
Okay.
But you know, when you sit down, I mean, when I sit down and meet with a seller, I have my computer, all right? And I brought this along just as a sample. I have this little screen. I have this little screen that mounts there, and I connect my computer up to it, and people look at my analysis, and I can play with the numbers to be able to show them what happens with different things in the market. Because what is it that you're looking to do by doing this analysis?
Show value, your value.
You're looking to create value on why you are better than somebody else, without ever having to say, I'm better than somebody else, or somebody else isn't good. I'm simply saying, this is the analysis that I'm doing. And most of the time, the people look at this analysis, you know, and it's like, okay.
8%? Sure.
Now, I want to show you a couple. Okay, here's one that I did for 4830 Richmond Road. Now, this person had somebody come out and tell them they would sell their house for $535,000 for 4.5%. Okay, and they were a past client of mine, but they had clicked on a link about when they knew they were going to have to relocate. They clicked on a link, and of course this person came out and came out to see the house, and gave them a price on the spot with nothing to back up the price. It's like PFA, 535. You know what PFA is, right? Plucked from air. Okay? And that's where the price came from. They plucked it from air. So when I did this analysis on this house, when I looked at 2022, it told me that the range would have been 545 to 456. Now these people had paid like 400 for it 15 months prior, but they put a lot into it. They new roof, new windows, all this other, put a pole building up, all this other stuff. But the big problem with this analysis is that in Forks Township, there had not been another property sold with a 2-acre lot since this house sold 15, 16 months ago. So therefore, this is where the exception comes in, where you go outside of the municipality. Because now you need to be able to determine, what do we have? What do we have that can show us value? So in that case, you would go outside. I should look right here rather than up there, it's much easier. So I did an analysis of 1 to 3 acre lots. And 1 to 3 acre lots gave me 562 and 480 on what had sold in 2022. And I'm gonna look at more on the price to assess value on this particular analysis because my square footage is not gonna be as important as what my land assessment is. Does that make sense? And then I went and looked at what's on the market. And when you look at my naming conventions, you know, testing the market, almost market driven pricing depending. I don't use any terms that, I mean, I use things that people are gonna be able to understand. They're testing the market, people know what that is, I'm putting my foot in the water and let's see what happens, what's the temperature? Almost market proven, they've almost got it sold. But you know, this was giving me 607. And looking at the property and what I had, and looking at what I had from this right here, we priced it at 575.
And what did the other person say?
Pardon me?
What did the other agent tell him?
535. So I listed it at 575, and my brokerage fee was 6% plus $750. It's commission.
Just on the side?
It's my fee. It's on the listing contract. The fixed fee, I just put a number in there.
Splits?
Pardon me?
Is that subject to splits?
Yes, it's brokerage fee.
What
So,
did you call it? What did you call the 750?
commission.
On top of the percentage?
Commission is a percentage and a flat fee. It's right in the listing, it's right in the listing contract. And the listing contract even provides that you can charge that up front. There's a place to charge that up front.
Did they ask the difference of what it was
It's for commission.
for? You say commission twice, when you say percentage and then a fee.
His fee is 6% plus $750.
It's the commission.
Flat.
That's, I mean, it's like, I don't wanna, some people say I charge a transaction fee. I don't charge a transaction fee, I charge a commission. Buyer agency, charge a commission. I don't even, I won't even allow a title company to put it on as a transaction fee. Now, when I met with, when this was scheduled to be appraised, I had this whole sheet printed up about everything that had been done to the property. And about what the zoning classification was of this property compared to others. You know, and I had my knee surgery, I had somebody come and pick me up and I'm going up to the house to open up the house in my walker, really, seriously. And I'm giving the guy my sheet for comps, and I got my appraisal of 575. That's why I use an electronic lockbox. I'll go meet an appraiser any day of the week to justify my price. An appraiser wants to get into a house, no problem, when do you wanna be there, I'll be there. All right, so there's one, and this is where it actually works. Now, another one,
Do you ever fight with appraisers?
pardon me?
Do you fight very often with appraisers?
Why do you think he needed knee surgery? Kick Bill Sterling's ass,
I like Bill Sterling.
you're the one.
Yeah.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me that you would like Bill Sterling.
I take that as a compliment. Okay, now, 46 Old Penn was another one that when I looked at doing the house, now in this one, I got feedback from people, you know, like, your price is ridiculous, nothing in there sold that high. Okay, because I priced this house. See, because I looked at the market data as a whole, because, and this is gonna be important to what people looked at. It's a 2-story twin, and this development is a lot of townhouse, 3-story townhouses. So I wanted to establish the trend for the development, and then I wanted to go in and look at just the 2 stories. Okay? So I did a 2021 two-story analysis. $322,492. I priced it at $320. One weekend I had 4 offers, I think it was, and we sold it for $325.
So,
And then we did have an appraisal issue, and we negotiated down to $320.
so you pull all of 2022 sales.
Pardon me?
You pull all of 2022 sales and establish your ratio.
2021, because when this was 2021, I pulled all of them in the development.
Of that year. Do you do kind of like a moving year, like a 6 month or a whole, like 12 months?
Generally, I'm doing 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, you see on the bottom, it says 2021.
Oh,
It's got
no, I'm
multiple
lost
years
there.
in there.
So you have each sheet you have
These different
each
times.
year. So you got 2020, you have 2019, 2020,
2019,
Okay.
2020, 2021, 2022,
Uh-huh.
current.
And current is just whatever thing.
The current is going to be whatever I have that's available and under agreement.
Okay.
That market took a nosedive.
What?
That the availability of properties just went shrunk to nothing. They were just watching your sheets.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
that's a whole thing. So when you're looking at this and you're showing people that when you're doing this analysis and showing them what's out there, it helps you to get your numbers across.
And you're broadcasting each year what that price to assess value, price per square footage, and you can then say, look, it's dropping 0.2 every year or increase, or is that how you do that to interpolate what this year is then?
There you go.
So that's your summary sheet then? Kind of sums all 3 years?
Yeah, this is 4 years.
Okay.
And how do you
Yep.
final numbers?
Right, that would make sense to me.
How do you what?
How do you take the final numbers based on what else you compete with?
I don't look at what I'm competing with. I'm only looking at what the history is and what it's gonna tell me. So when I've looked at this, I mean, you know, in this particular case, and this is just something I did. This was a history to show you Bethlehem Township 2019 to 2022. That's the only reason I did this analysis. It's the same property. Here's what's important to look at. When you look at this analysis here, 5015 Preakness, that was the property that I used in every analysis for Bethlehem Township 2 stories. When I did 2004 to 2011, I used that property. So that gives you an idea when you're looking at it. Here's the same property, and this is what happened. This is what the history is. Because I wanted everybody to be able to see it based upon something that was very similar. Same with Hanover Township. I picked a property. I went in, I built out all the entire analysis. I download all the data, I import it in, and then massage the data.
Joe, earlier you were saying you had a company that does this, or do you pull all this information in?
No, I have real market reports that are done. I have a company that does that. This is something I do totally myself. So when I go out and list the prop, I mean, you can do this, if you do your listing in one step, you can do the same thing. You can just go in and look at the property and create it, but it's a lot to do if you don't want the listing. But the big thing is that, I mean, it's like you're giving people data that they can then look at. And then look at this and they're totally blown away when, you know, when the guy's coming in and, you know, saying 535, Now, this one here, I was competing with another agent there, gave them more data. They also were gonna, this other agent was gonna do it at 4.5. I ended up having to reduce to 5.5 and 750 for that one. It's the only one I reduced to 0.5% last year.
And that was the one that went for 320.
That went for 320.
What was the other agent listing it for?
I don't remember. I was more. But, you know, but the thing was, is that it's again, you know, between what you do in the analysis and what you're gonna tell people you're gonna do in the marketing is why people are going to pay you the price. Okay? Now,
Like, I can see this working really well with analyticals and stuff, but like, suppose you have like a high D personalities, like, I don't really care. How do you go about, I mean, because obviously there's a lot of value in this, but somebody who's like a high D who doesn't
I
care.
don't, you know what? Give me a high D that doesn't care about money.
Seriously.
Everyone wants to see this. Would you consider an engineer high D? No? What type of job would you consider a high D? I'm not good with all that stuff. I just kind of go out and work.
I would say a high D, an attorney, doctor, results driven. I mean, which obviously is results driven. I just want to know what it is. I don't care how you got to it.
Well, see, and that's the point is, when I go out to meet with people, and I mean, I have all the printouts, but this is what I show them. This is how I start out doing the entire presentation. I'm not getting into all the charts, because if they don't want the charts and they're not interested, I give them the charts, but if they're not interested, I don't go into
So I was gonna say, with a high D, you just do like you do with some other people, you wave your hand over it, you go, here's the results. You know, but they can see the data behind it, so it carries credibility.
Yeah, I mean, they get to see the data, but this is the part that they're interested in. And I mean, everybody's interested in what the money is. It's the biggest thing that they have in their mind. Yeah. Any questions so far on what I've gone over?
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
When you do this and get to the numbers, do you adjust it based on the condition of the house?
That's a great question.
Because I would see, I can see this, but you don't know.
That's a good question. I didn't get into that, and I apologize, but the reality of it is, and somebody asked me about how you do the pricing. What am I dealing with here? And how is this range determined? Average. Okay? I mean, I'm looking at the average, I'm not looking at the median, I'm looking at the average. So this is an average property. If I've got something that is above average, then I would do another analysis, and I can show you one of those as well. This property is settling this week, so I can go into that. Now, when I did the analysis on this property, this was done. This was done in the end of 2021, 1814 Eastman Avenue. And you can see there's a whole bunch of blue in here. So I'm going in and I'm looking at these properties and determining what is going to be somewhat of a premium property. And so then I went and created another sheet which said, I'm looking at the premium properties that your house is comparable to, and I'm gonna tell you, this is what these properties would be selling for. This told me that my price to assessed value ratio for this property was 420,172. All right? So we listed the property for 425,000. We had a sight unseen offer on the property, and we sold it for 450. Yes.
I'm just gonna repeat what I think the process is.
You need to speak up. I'm hard of hearing over hearing aids, but you gotta talk loud.
Okay,
Yeah, for me too.
I'm gonna repeat what I'm understanding the process is, and please correct me. Number one, look for sold and settled, within the last 3 years, same style, same municipality. Get the average sale price to the assessed value, the average price square footage. Now, what's questionable,
You have this here now?
I do,
Okay.
the numbers at the bottom, so the 421.72, the 399, how is that calculated?
That is the average. So what you're looking at, this number right here, the 1.90 is the average of all of these numbers. And then you take the 1.90 times your assessed value and you come up with a number.
Why sometimes is the square footage, the range going down or going up?
It's just the way it is, it's the way it works. And that's the finesse that you look at in dealing with this to where you're going to be price-wise.
Why would you use the average instead of the median?
You know, the people have asked me that. It's just I've always used the average. I was actually going to get into a discussion of the definition of statistical average or mean and the statistical number of the median. You know, and I've done a lot of analysis and it doesn't, it's just that, and the thing is that more people, how many people know the difference between average and median? Your exception. Most people, when I'm sitting down and doing this in front, they have no idea what the difference is, but they understand average.
Well, yeah, okay, that's true, but I mean, if you have an average and you have like an outlier in the data set, like 3312 timber, which sold for $238 a square foot, which is way higher than everything else, that skews the whole data set.
Which one?
I'm on the Bethlehem Township market.
Okay,
this one.
number one, you're the Bethlehem Township.
Right.
I
I'm
didn't-
on this sheet specifically, with the price range you came up with, you're using the average, it's skewed higher.
Is that a Bethlehem Township?
No, I'm not talking about the property up there, I'm
I
talking
know,
about,
no, but that
Look at
says
this.
Bethlehem Township?
yes,
Okay, remember when I discussed statistical outlier?
yeah.
Okay, when I did that analysis for everybody as a sample, I did not go through and do any analysis to remove any statistical outliers. I would normally do that and remove those outliers.
So then that you'd have a different number here then. for the
Right.
price range.
That's just a
Okay, alright,
sample. That's a sample. I just, and I mean, I put all these numbers together and I had to limit how much time I was gonna spend because I actually do have a job. But you're not paying me to do this.
Joe,
You're all paying out a lot of money out of your own pocket to do this, whether you realize it or not. Your time investment costs you money, yes.
on a monthly basis or a weekly basis, do you have a set of criteria that you just continue to update?
No.
No, you just,
Do it as
I
needed
mean,
for
let's
the
say,
listing.
you know, if you don't have a blanket for, a blanket spreadsheet for Bethlehem Township that you update every month.
Kind of.
Okay.
Yes, you set yourself a benchmark or baseline, and you're not redoing this for every analysis.
Pardon me?
Your data, right, on colonials in such and such municipality, if you wanna do an analysis with outside you gotta start all over, you gotta do all your,
That's exactly what I
how do
do.
I say this? Every time you
That's
do an
exactly
analysis,
what I do.
start over.
I start over.
So there's nothing really to update, right?
How long does it take me to do it?
But that's a good question.
Yeah, but if you had a.
I mean, I can whip it through, I can whip through them pretty quick.
Like how long?
An hour. You know, sometimes it's more.
Have you practiced that, so.
But, yeah, and I wanna get into, that's two sets there. Okay, all right. And I wanna get in, you know, somebody asked me, do I have a set thing? You asked me, yes. I have all these real market reports, they're done, I have these from 2014 to current. So I can go in and look at this. So for example, last night my reports came in. And these are all the municipalities that I do these reports, that I have these reports done on a weekly basis.
Can you open one up just so I can see what, I think I'm pretty visual. For instance. Okay, so, oh, all right, I see what you're doing, okay.
And then this goes in, so I can look at this. And when I go out, Scott, to answer your question, when I go out and I want a listing appointment, if I have one of these for the municipality, I take it with me. I include it in. I mean, I'm just doing one in Bethlehem Township. In my home book that I put there, the actual listing presentation book that I do, I did everything in there, plus I put all the real market reports in that book for Bethlehem Township, Bethlehem School District, and Northampton County. So that they could look at that. But as you can see, right now, in West Bethlehem, you have 7/10 of a month's supply. And then I can go in, this is really getting on top.
You're exporting all this from GLBR?
No, this all comes from GLBAR, but it's done by an outside service. An outside service pulls the data every Sunday night from the MLS and puts these reports together.
Who's the outside source?
Real market reports.
So it's up, your general information is updated every week.
Correct. And then I just pay them, I pay a monthly fee to have that done.
What if a house has flooding, is in a flooding area? How do you do that? Is it just comparing all houses in the flooding area?
That's,
Or is there like the ratios of the supply?
there's not a lot of those that you get. I have a listing right now, it's flood zone and it's coming.
I've got one that's coming, that's why I'm asking.
No, that's a killer. I mean, it just depends upon how difficult that flood zone is.
Yeah.
But that can be a killer. So now, when you look at that Bethlehem West, and then you say, I wanna compare to Lehigh County. Oops. So Lehigh County has 1.2 months supply of inventory right now. So the theory being that if everything were to sell in Lehigh County, it would take 1.2 months for everything to sell, and you'd have no more inventory in Lehigh County. And that's a theoretical number based upon how things, the rate things are selling based upon the current inventory, and nothing else coming into the market. It's a theoretical number that's used everywhere.
But that's a very big sample compared to the west side of Bethlehem,
Correct.
even though one is in the other.
Correct. But it's still important for somebody to look at that as a means of comparison, because if they're in an area where the county's at 1.2 and they're at a higher absorption rate, that means that your house is not gonna sell as quick as the one that's at as the one in West Bethlehem. That's the point. Any other questions? I was planning to go in and say, okay, let's do a property, just to show you how it works. So, this guide that I have right here, I went through every step of building this, so that if somebody wanted to build this entire process in their MLS profile, you follow this step-by-step instructions. It's got screenshots all the way through, and you can go ahead and build this within your MLS. I've already got it built. I already have a master sheet already done. Does anybody need this copy? Somebody go to tell Rachel I need more. Okay. How many more do we need? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's why the guns are out.
Okay. Anybody have anything here they'd like me to do? I'm gonna do one real quick. I'm not gonna get into getting into eliminating the outliers and things like that. I can show you how you do it, but I don't wanna get into that.
I wanna see it.
Anything in particular? Let's do 4841 Concord. Okay, so 4841 Concord. And it is 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, 2372 square feet. And your assessed value is 83.2. Okay. Now, I'm not
Do you
gonna
go
get
in
into
and,
how,
do you go in and double check that on the tax record before you?
sometimes, yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, if I'm doing it and I'm gonna be doing the analysis of the property, I'm going to look at it.
Right.
Okay, so now what I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna go into how you go and establish the search and all that, okay? But I am gonna go in and say that I'm gonna build a concept. And so I'm gonna add a concept. And the first name is gonna be Concord, and, which I spelled wrong. And the last name is going to be 4841. The email address I'm gonna use is joe@lvhomehunter.com. Because you cannot use your email address that you have on file with the MLS to do this. They will not allow you to build searches coming to yourself. I do this way because this allows me to see anytime anything comes in relating to the property that I'm listing. So when anything changes for this property, for this auto search, I'm gonna get notified. Okay, so I'm gonna save my contact. And now I'm gonna go in and do a detailed search. I'm gonna look at available with contingency, active, no showing, sold and settled, 1/1/2019 plus, under agreement, residential, detached, in Bethlehem Township. I am going to say that I want fee simple. I do not want bank owned, and I do not want real estate owned. And I am going to look at a colonial, a contemporary, Dutch colonial, farmhouse style, French provincial, traditional, Tudor, Victorian, and number of stories too. And that gives me 371 properties.
What was your date range?
Pardon me?
2019, 1/1.
Thank you.
Okay, so, and now, I'm gonna go in also, and I'm gonna say that I only want 4+ bedrooms. That takes me down to 290. 3+ bathrooms, that takes me down to 270.
And why would you not just use 4 beds and 3 baths?
Because I don't want to eliminate anything that may be entered into another bedroom or something like that.
Or a half bath
I want,
Get it.
Okay, so now I have 270 properties. So I'm gonna look for my results. So I have all these properties, and now I'm going to go in and I gotta get these somewhere where I can track what I have. So I'm gonna go in and save, and I'm gonna say new auto email, and I'm saving it to 4841 Concord. Concord. And I forgot to do, I'm gonna enable concierge mode and remove reverse prospecting, I forgot to do that. So I'm enabling the concierge mode so I can go in and look at all these properties. I can approve and reject properties based upon what I want. Save and go to approvals. Now, to save yourself from going too crazy when you go to do this, and I have that listed in there, you're gonna go in and look at a thumbnail view. You have 50 as the maximum, and you're going to start your search, or you start your filtering process at the end. You start at the very end and work your way forward. The reason why you have to start at the end is because if you start at the beginning and you eliminate properties, you never know where to go to next. If you eliminate 15 properties, well, where's the next page that you go to? So you go to the very end.
Did you sort them by date?
Nope.
Go back to how you sort them.
Nope, I don't do any of that at this point. All I'm doing at this point is I'm looking at the thumbnail views and the data to be able to tell what I want to keep and what I want to get rid of.
So, you have to go to the end, why, I didn't understand that.
Pardon me?
Why would you have to go to the end? I didn't understand that.
Most people don't, but I learned the hard way.
Okay.
You start at the beginning, you eliminate 10 properties. Then your next page, what's happening is properties that are on page 2 are coming over to page 1. So how do you know when to move to the next page?
The page moves to you.
No. I won't show you now, but if you want to see it, I'll show you how it works.
Yeah. All right.
But you gotta go to the end first.
How could you get narrow it by square footage?
Because so many times that is inaccurate.
Okay.
Yeah, there's something bizarre that happens too, I think, sometimes if I've done that before, I know there's a property that just sold down the street from me, it's the same square footage, but it's like total square footage that it shows up on the stuff versus above grade or something like that.
Okay. I'm really running tight on time, and I don't want to keep you too long. So I'm looking at this, and all these things that are new construction, they're out. I'm not going to use new construction when I'm going in and looking at something that's existing. So all the new, and you can't go in and eliminate the new construction because it sometimes doesn't work. So I'm going through this, and I am going to be looking at, and I'm not going to go through and do the entire process, but I'm going to go through and I'm going to eliminate what I do not want to have in my analysis. And then as I'm going down through that,
Is this also when you look at, identify outliers?
so, this one right here is 1977. That's too old for what I want. Here's another new construction. So you were saying something about outliers?
Is this also when you go through and eliminate outliers?
No, that's going to be in the spreadsheet. Are we?
Graph floor is also in construction.
Right. Okay, so you got the idea, right? I'm gonna look at the size, okay? I'm gonna look at other things to make sure that I have something that isn't too old, all those things, all right? But I'm not gonna go through and do the entire analysis because I only have 25 minutes, all right? So I'm gonna reject these. You see what happens now, we went from 270 to 260. Now, just for Scott's benefit, we'll go over here real quick. Okay. Now 51 to 100, see 411 Hummingbird is your first property. Right? See that? And the 51 to 100 sheet. Okay, so now we're gonna go over here, and we're going to, just for the hell of it, we're just going to eliminate a bunch of properties. They may actually be good, but we're gonna eliminate them anyway. Okay, so we've eliminated some properties, and now we've rejected another, what? 6 properties. Now, we're gonna go back to, now we're gonna go to page 2. And what's the first property? 3843 Fairleigh Court. Where'd Hummingbird go? Hummingbird's somewhere in page 1.
Yeah.
So when you go all the way down through page 1, and you've eliminated all your properties, and then you go to page 2, if you've eliminated 6 properties from page 2, now go over to page 1. So it just keeps cycling through. You never know. The only way you can accurately do this is you gotta go to the end first. Pardon me?
Yeah, so you're halfway, Hummingbird's halfway up page 1, and then if you go to page 2 without realizing that, you're gonna miss those 6.
Well, but see, the thing is that if you go all the way through page 1, it doesn't come over to page 2 doesn't come over to page 1 until you refresh,
Okay.
right?
Yep. Thank you for my benefit.
How are you choosing which ones you're eliminating?
I'm going to eliminate based upon age, based upon a lot of different things that I would look at in the property. I want to get into other mechanics before I can go into that, but it's really what's not going to be comparable to what I'm dealing with. I knew that this was going to be hard to do in 2 hours. So, now I've got this, let's say that I've eliminated a whole bunch of properties and I really haven't, but I want to go and see where I've got. So, I'm going to approve all 254 properties that are left. All right? Now, what I need to do is, and I've approved them all, so now I need to go to my contacts and look at Concord, look at my sent email, look at my initial email, select everything, and export all the data using my CMA residential spreadsheet.
It's a template?
Yes, it's an export. When you go through your list, it tells you how to go build your export.
Okay.
My export is built so that every column is in the order that I wanted it.
Right. Yep.
So you created that?
Yes, that's a custom export.
I've done
Right.
It's,
And that's what this is.
you get to select, yeah, so you get to select what you want to and what order they come in. Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing when you start looking at the export, what you can do in taking data. And back when I had my own company years ago, before we had a lot of these services, we used to download the entire MLS every month. We had all the data on a server so we could see what we had all the time. Yeah, I don't need to do that. Okay, so CMA Concord. All right. So I downloaded that to my download file. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my drive on Google, and I'm going to search Market Study Master. So I have a master created which has everything in it that I need, which is not a lot. I've got to put most of it in. But now I'm going to import my data. I'm going to upload the data from my computer onto Google Drive, and it's a CMA Concord. It's going to ask me what I want to do. I want to replace the current sheet and detect automatically. I've already told the MLS how to give me my data. So my data is already prepared for me the way I want it. The only things that aren't there are what I need to do as custom screens. That's the only thing that I need to do. So now I'm gonna import my data. Now I have everything there. I'm gonna change my headings. And I do this because I wanna have toys. Seller assist and seller concession and seller assist, I'm gonna delete that because I'm not gonna need it. Sometimes I do. I'm also going to delete area and zip code because I don't need that. I already know that what I have, although, you know, sometimes I see that people don't have the right things in. I'm gonna change my status date from the code that they have to date. Whoops. Come on. And I use, all right, and then I've got a bunch of stuff over here that I've used for different things that I'm going to get rid of. I don't need these. Sometimes I do. I'm gonna delete those columns. I'm gonna delete that at this point. This is gonna become, generally I'm gonna delete garage because almost everything that I'm looking at has a garage. But sometimes I don't, sometimes I leave it in. I'm gonna delete my style because of what I asked for. Okay. So in here, I'm gonna add a column. And this is going to be price to assess value. And I'm going to do the sum. Price per square foot's already done.
The sum,
Pardon me?
well, I can't see it.
It's price divided by assessed value.
No, but you did the sum to something, what are you summing?
Pardon me?
What sum did you just?
I did the sum, which is the price divided by the assessed value.
Equals.
Now, this is really gonna be a pretty crappy assessment because of, simply because I'm cutting out by doing more of a search, but, and now I'm gonna look at and sometimes I get this backwards, but that's all right. See, it's automatically filling the columns in for me. I do the first one, bing, it automatically fills everything in. All right. And I'm usually not doing this on my laptop, I'm doing it on a bigger screen. Okay. So, at this point, what I need to do is I want to go in and finish formatting the data. This, I will do that on that type of number. I'm going to do this also on 2-digit. And now, you know, somebody asked me about the date. I'm going to sort my data because I know that I didn't complete complete my removal of new construction. So the problem with that is that you end up, they're recording the whole thing. You end up with values that are not correct because you have no real assessment in there. Like there was one that had an assessed value ratio of 35. So what I'm doing now is I've sorted that. Yeah. I'm sorry, let me get backwards. So all of these I've got to get rid of here. All the way down to like here.
So those are the new construction because they don't have an assessed value, which is why they have an error in the price to AV.
Right. Okay. So now I'm going to sort again. I'm pretty much done with what I want to do with that part. But I want to now get into where the data should actually be. So I'm selecting everything. And how many people use Google spreadsheets or use Excel or something else? Google? Everybody's using Google?
Excel.
The reason I like to use this is because then when I go out and sit down in front of people, I can access the data. So now I'm sorting based upon status and status date. Okay? Available with contingency, I'm going to end up making that one available. I still consider that available. I'm going to go down to the bottom, take my under agreements, and move them up to the top. Okay, so now I have everything the way I want it, sorted by date and sorted by status. I'm going to add three rows in. And my subject property is 4841. Oops. And the assessment is 83.2, and it's 2372 on square feet. This now becomes testing the market. Insert another 3 rows dividing these up. And this becomes almost
And this is that,
And
okay.
then it's saying March improvement pricing. It's
Testing is under agreement is almost.
yes.
What?
Yeah.
I can't read when I say something, she was just
I was-
translating for me.
I was just telling him what you were typing. Clever.
Okay. So now I start doing my formatting. You can do it any way you want. This is how I always do it. center everything. And I start hitting my columns to where I need them to be, simply because I want to be able to have this be printable. And maybe somebody's better with all this that can come up with a better way to do it. I take my headers that format that with wrapping so that it wraps. Assessment, price to assess value is going to need to be wide because the numbers go in there. Price per square foot I need to increase. Okay. I would have this in here in case there was something that came up on why I wanted to delete that or make a note about something with what the pricing is. But at that point, so I'm going to average this.
That's the ratio you have.
And then this is just the column, this is just column, averaging the columns.
What columns you have?
He's averaging the price per square foot, price AV, and the price, original price. Price divided by original price. Oh, thank you. There you go, Sam. I know.
So if we just send you our comps, you can do this for us, all right?
How much you cost?
$300
6% plus
Higher.
$750 an hour.
Now, okay, so now I want to look at what my price is going to be. See, that's probably not what I right there. They probably would not end up using that. I want to format this. I mean, the formatting is all the same what you do. I mean, basically, this is the entire process. It's just that then you do it for each one. And then you just duplicate and delete. So I'm going to go in and look at this one here. I'm going to duplicate this sheet. It comes down here. I rename this current. And testing the market and almost market proving stay there. Everything else comes out. I then go back over here. I'm going to get rid of this.
You just put each status on its own sheet, right?
No, I do available and pending as current. Because see, I'm not using that, I'm not using any formula there to really determine price. It's like a reference, but it's not something that I'm going to use because I don't know what it's going to sell for, and I don't know what it sold for.
Yeah. Right.
All right?
Okay, so, but you're pulling out the sold and settled to its own sheet.
Sold and settled go on a sheet by year. So then what's going to happen next, you know, and everybody can look at this and develop their own way to do it. The only thing I can tell you is if you're working for me, you do it my way. As some people have already learned that you do it my way, period, that's it. So I'm going to duplicate it, and then this becomes 2022. And then I'm going to go in, and I'm going to go on the 2022. and delete everything down to the beginning of 2022. I go back over here, I go down to the bottom. And I'm gonna delete all the 2022s. And then just go do the process again.
Got it. But based on the year by year bottom number that you get added and multiplied by the assessed value, how do you then determine the actual results?
Well, you know, when you're looking at it, that's kind of like the experience that you end up with when you look at those two numbers as to where you're gonna put it. It gives you a range.
That's what we
And
end up
then
with.
you've got to go look at this and say, well, this house is a piece of crap that needs $100,000 of work, or is this superior? Like you saw what I did on Eastman when I looked at something and said, this is superior, I go and pull out all the premium and give you that. Because this is giving you the average. The most important thing that you're looking at the trends that are there so that you can determine, are we going up or are we going down? Or are we flatlining?
How do you find this compares to RPR or other automatic CMA creators?
I don't know, I don't use them.
When you go and you give somebody a price, they say, well, Zillow has me at XYZ.
Okay.
And, I mean, are you finding that you're higher, lower, you don't pay any attention to it, you just know? Your price is your price.
I didn't look at Zillow.
Right.
It has no.
I don't
effect.
either, but my sellers do.
The sellers can look at Zillow, and I explained to them why what we're doing is actually looking at the data that is in the MLS. We're really looking at all the current data. And Zillow is, not necessarily looking at all the accurate data.
And that's what I tell them, I mean, I don't price from Zillow, I'm just curious how the process is.
Some buyers are convinced that Zillow is, Zillow does affect, I think, buyer behavior.
Oh yeah, so speak to me about, tell us about how you use this with buyers.
Same way I use it with sellers. Here's the indicated value.
So you run the comps, so when we run our comps, you show a house and say, oh, we love it, yada, yada, yada. We're gonna run the numbers, come up with a good price.
This is the address.
Yeah, he did, he just did a good No, he didn't go down to the, he didn't go down to the soul. He didn't go down to the soul, down to the bottom.
Right.
We didn't get that far. But it's the clicky with the sun and this. That clicky with the sun. Yeah. Price.
Did you guys?
I tried to find one that I did, but, you know, it's basically, I'm doing the exact same analysis.
Same thing, just with,
But I don't go as far back, I don't do as much of a trend. I'm really looking at what's current year and what's up, what's on the market now, and what they're looking at in terms of under agreement.
so you're going,
What's
so
short-
you're just doing, so if you're creating an offer today, you're looking at since January first of this year, period.
You know, because everybody's gonna go, I mean, you know, they're looking at Zillow, they're looking at all this other stuff. I wanna show them what's really out there.
Question about the price per square footage and, you know, getting the average and getting that number at the bottom, which is, you know, what I've seen here, different than, you know, the price to the assessed value, right? So having those two numbers, seeing those two numbers, what is the purpose of the price per square footage, just to give you a sense as to how different it is? Because I know that square footage a lot of times can be an error in the tax records. So what is it really, how are you using that? What is that?
It's part of what goes into what I look at setting price. It's just part of the whole entire analysis. There's none of this stuff is perfect. None of this is perfect, and I mean, it can cause errors and have things that are wrong, but in general, it gives me a better indication of value, and it's a better sales tool on creating value on what I do. That is a major factor that you're looking at here, is that you're doing more. And when you practice this and you get used to doing this, it does come pretty quick. I mean, for the longest time, when I had a lot of staff, I would come up and staff would format, print, give me all the stuff, and it'd be, like, you come out and present.
Oh, I can imagine it's just a huge boost in confidence too. Nobody knows the numbers like I know the numbers, kind of, right? You can back up your own numbers, and it's just a confidence booster.
Well, the point is that when you sit down, I mean, I don't address an individual, I say, most people are going to look at giving you 3 comps. I'm giving you a 3-year analysis to tell you where value is. Find somebody else that's gonna do, I mean, and
Nobody does it like this. Not a 3-year, I mean, and I get it, I understand.
but see, and the point is,
There's definitely value to it.
here's what's important. This is going to become more important right now. Because, you know, everybody's looking at, well, the values have been going through the roof. So now you're gonna be able to show people the value flatlined. This is where it is. You're starting to see that already. I mean, I've done some studies and I'm seeing the value flatline.
How do you change on the flip, when it starts to shift, when it starts to change? And we saw a little bit of that in the early slides that you showed us from 2004 to 2011. And then what was starting to happen after 2011, the market was starting to change a little bit and start to increase, look better, etc. That's gonna happen again eventually, where we're gonna have all this high data, we're gonna have everything that's happening right now. I mean, it's not necessarily gonna bottom out, it's not necessarily gonna drop. You know, I don't have a crystal ball, but, right? So I mean, how do you deal with that shift, the change, when looking at all of this from 3 years ago?
Well, at that point, you know, because people, you're gonna look at this, see, because when I looked at the one at 46 Old Penn, and it's going like this, that's why I can say to them, we can price this at 320, we're gonna get the buyer. So we can push the price. When you're looking at that the values are going up, you can push the price, and you can justify pushing the price somewhat. If somebody goes too far in pushing the price, you can look at that and say, well, I can't get anything to support that. I mean, and sometimes I push the price and then, you know, we've got to retract.
So when your 3-year analysis has to do with simply showing this trend line, correct?
Correct.
To set the price today, you're looking at current only?
No. I don't look at current because current is telling you current active. No, because current's what somebody's
No,
asking.
I'm sorry, you're right. So, like this year, like,
I'm looking at where it is and I'm looking at how my trend line's going. If my trend line is almost flatlining and I'm looking at that, my price to original price ratios are somewhat dropping, I'm looking at my market time is going up. All those things go into to look at what you're going to do in the market.
Were you gonna talk about the difference between 2008 and now?
I just did the 2009 to now. I didn't do 2000.
Well,
No, I
you
did
have to talk to
2018.
customers
No,
about
it's not important. I did the 2004 to 2011 just to kind of show you how when you start to see things that are going down, why you need to go in and say, well, yes, I know that 300 is where it was last year, but that's not where it is now. And you're looking at what's current now, and it's going down. That's what you're looking at doing.
so, right, so I got my mind around this, 3 years, it shows a trend line, this is where it's going, right? But in 2018, that assessed value is different than 2022.
No,
Okay, help me.
the assessed value is the same. Assessed value hasn't changed. The ratio has changed, but the assessed value is not.
Well, okay, yeah, that's what I'm kind of getting at. So you're right, the ratio, I can't multiply a 2018 ratio against the assessed value from 2018 in order to get my price today. Are you averaging 2018?
You're confusing. The assessment is fixed.
Yep.
The sales price to assessed value ratio for 2018 is different than it was for 2022.
Correct.
Okay?
So when I'm
It's
setting
called
property,
inflation.
right, so when I'm setting property values, I'm looking at my 2022 AV.
Yes.
I don't want 2018 AV in there.
You're looking at that to show people a history and where the trend is.
Right.
That's simply there to give you the trend.
Yep,
So
okay.
you have a market study and trend analysis. So you're looking at that based upon trend to follow where the trend is.
Yep. Got it.
And when you
Otherwise-
start to see the trend flatline,
Mhm.
which is what you're going to see, that's when you need to look at this and say, okay, well, we're not gonna push the price. Pardon me? It's somewhat happening now, but it's pretty, we're still looking at we're not looking as much, but we are still looking at some appreciation coming up. Okay?
Very good.
This is great.
Okay, hopefully it was worth your time. Any questions, let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.